as more and more Americans are going to fill their gas tanks and seeing much higher prices. And we heard Psaki address that as well, saying two things. One, that the president continues to do everything he can to try to mitigate the impacts of the higher gas prices, including, as she confirmed, a conversation between U.S. and Venezuelan officials about energy supplies, but also pointing the finger directly at Vladimir Putin, saying he is the one that is largely responsible for the instability that has caused this spike. So clearly the White House trying to get ahead of that and reminding the American people that there's one real culprit here that's responsible, and it's not in the White House, it's Vladimir Putin.
A Democratic lawmaker here, Senator Joe Manchin, who as recently as not even 24 hours ago said, hey, people will understand if we put this ban in place and then gas prices go up, the American people will get it. They understand that this is sort of the price of democratic freedoms abroad, et cetera, and of sending a message to Russia.
The one thing that lawmakers overwhelmingly oppose is the idea of a no-fly zone, the sort of military trigger that could spark a full-scale war between the United States and Russia. That remains off the table.
Well, this is the worst war since World War II. What Putin is doing today mirrors what Hitler did to Poland in 1939. I think people need to get their heads around that. This is not just some, small war abroad. This is, in scale and scope, the largest conventional war that we have seen in Europe since 1939.
The NATO countries know this, but they're operating under Putin's threat of a nuclear strike. Now, we don't know where that nuclear strike might come. We don't know if it's 1, 2, a dozen weapons, but everybody's running scared of it. And what Putin is doing is using that threat to sort of outmaneuver us.
U.S., NATO, help us with a no-fly zone. That's the only thing that will help. But the perspective here that we've heard from our generals is that starts World War III.
More breaking news in our world lead. Pressure mounting for the Biden administration to implement more sanctions and ban Russian oil imports. But as CNN's MJ Lee reports, that means the U.S. may be turning to some countries with rather unsavory leaders and oppressive governments, such as Venezuela and Saudi Arabia, to shore up that oil supply.
It means starting World War III. I think that people need to understand what a no-fly zone means.
Active discussions also underway in Washington on banning oil imports from Russia to further cripple the country's economy. The idea drawing bipartisan support on Capitol Hill.
It's basically foolish for us to keep buying products and giving profit and giving money to Putin to be able to use against the Ukrainian people.
Instead of being an exporter of energy, we became a consumer of Russian oil. This needs to stop.
But the economic implications are grim for American consumers, as gas prices, now over $4 a gallon, are nearing all-time record highs.
Now, as the U.S. considers a ban on Russian oil, it is thinking of different ways to bolster the global energy supply and bringing in more oil from other countries. And what we have seen the administration do is engage countries like Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. Jake, these are regimes that in another world, this administration might have been reticent to engage on these issues. It really just goes to show how much the Russia invasion of Ukraine has totally upended U.S. foreign policy. And is also an important reminder, of course, that gas prices is an important economic issue. It is also a very critical political issue for this White House.
All right, MJ Lee from the White House, thank you so much. Let's discuss, and let me pick it up right there, Naveen, because the White House has confirmed American officials were in Venezuela this weekend. Oil was not the only thing they were talking about, they said, but it certainly was something they were talking about. Axios reports a presidential trip to Saudi Arabia in the spring is under consideration. All of this is in an effort to produce more oil to help the global market. You know, I hear a lot of conservatives shooting at this, but I have to say, Maduro's awful. MBS is awful. I mean, they're making a good argument. Could this backfire?
I don't know that it's going to backfire in the sense that I think the president, and again, you saw Jen Psaki, they're saying that he's doing this for the American consumers. This is the reality that we have put on Joe Biden. This is 20 years of energy policy that is forcing Joe Biden into this situation. We've pursued that strategy, right? 10 years ago, the U.S. produced 5,000 barrels a day. We now produce more than 11,000 barrels a day. We are the world's largest producer of oil and gas. And yet it hasn't actually provided us any freedom from these petro dictators. And that's what we should be focused on, is getting free from them.
We should be doing more. To be fair, I think the administration has been trying to kneecap domestic production. And why wouldn't they allow oil to come in from Canada through the Keystone Pipeline, several 100,000 barrels a day, I believe? we should be doing more. So the administration, I think, has itself to blame in part for the predicament that we're in. That said, Americans have to sacrifice right now. We have to make the case that we have to sacrifice. We don't need the Russian oil.
I think the president needs to make a speech about that. I mean, you know, if you look at the polling, 80% of Americans say, okay, stop the importing of Russian oil. That's
Which polling, though? Did they say, and your gas will go up $1 a gallon?
Yeah, they did not. But that's where the president comes in, I think. You know, you have people saying, let's have a no-fly zone. You have to explain why that could only cause more conflict, potentially World War III.
Yeah, there's some crappy polling out there.
Right. But the president needs to say, look, if we're gonna stop importing Russian oil, I want to get some allies to do it. But here's how it will affect you. It's going to require some sacrifice. He didn't talk about sacrifice in the State of the Union speech. Maybe it was a little early.
You know,
I think no matter what happens, Biden's going to get criticized by Republicans.
That's the gig.
It's like we wouldn't have been in this situation if Biden had been more aggressive in the first place. If he had had a different energy policy, we wouldn't be in this situation.
A few days ago, we saw the governor of Florida berating students for wearing masks at an event. It turned out later that one of the students wearing a mask has a relative, an older, I think, grandfather who is immunocompromised. Today, Florida's controversial Surgeon General recommended that healthy children in Florida not get the COVID vaccine, completely at odds with CDC recommendations, which advise children 5 and older, all of them, get vaccinated.
So maybe this is symbolic or not, but what won't be symbolic is that prices at the pump are rising. And I know what both of you just said, but politically, the politics are going to be this is somehow related to Ukraine. And that is the political problem for the Democrats right now.
And